Charles. This is yet another meeting, not a Sunday with Charles, not necessarily closing in, although this may be part of it. This is another installation in our series of strange deaths, and we'll be examining the strange death of John Glasgow. And John, of course, was the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. That's going to be important. Of, is it CDI?
Yeah, CDI.
CDI, a construction contractor there in Little Rock, Arkansas, that was tasked with the construction of the now famous, at least on our broadcasts, William J. Clinton double-wide strip club and restaurant, presidential library, whatever it is that he's doing over there. But it's actually not a laughing matter at all. This is a story that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about or might not remember, but of course, Glasgow, he was pretty young. I think he was in his 30s, right?
Right.
38, went missing, and was actually missing for 7 years until a skull was randomly found by some hikers in a remote park there in Arkansas that was forensically determined to be the skull of John Glasgow, but the coroner's report that was issued is still inconclusive as to the method of death. And I did reach out to the coroner's office this morning for this broadcast. That was pretty weird. Strange response there. But I know you've prepared a lot of material for us today. Perhaps we should just get right into it.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Jason. This is a story that I noticed actually as I got involved with the Clinton Foundation, because his remains, Glasgow's remains, were found around March 12th, 2015. I wrote my first piece that got a lot of attention on the Clinton Foundation March 16th, 2015, but I left the Glasgow stuff out. In part because there's so many suspicious deaths and accidents involving the Clintons, the Clinton body count, that it's a very natural thing for the liars, dissemblers that run the Clinton crime family to immediately say, "Oh, you're a conspiracy kook,"
right,
if you bring up these suspicious deaths.
Right.
But this is one, as I say, I've been waiting until really now to go through and share with the crowd, waiting for the crowd to get a certain size, waiting for the investigators to really be familiar with the intimate details of the Clinton Foundation frauds. And it'd be one thing to say, well, this is just some young guy and unfortunate death and who knows what really happened. But what we're going to take the crowd through today are the many signs that I see as a financial type of a true motive here to kill this guy.
Right.
John Glasgow was asking very tough questions, it would seem, that could have unraveled the Clinton Foundation frauds just as Hillary was losing her first primary contest, first set of primary contests to Barack Obama. It was a pivotal moment. And had this guy still lived, evidently he had been at it for a while, trying to decipher what was really going on with the books of the company that he was responsible for, was the prime contractor for the Clinton Foundation complex, but also the prime contractor for another world headquarters for something called the Heifer Project International.
The Heifer Project.
Which is an interesting old Christian charity that got its start, I think, in the 40s or 50s, basically saying that, rather than give somebody money, the poor person money, we'll give that person farm animals.
Oh.
And it's a pretty famous charity. They decided that they were going to build their world headquarters on the same set of land that the Clinton Foundation is based on. And this Heifer Project International was also audited by BKD at this time, the same accounting firm. And so the Heifer Project International has the same sets of issues that the Clinton Foundation did back in 2004, 5, and 6, of operating internationally through subsidiaries and not necessarily explaining exactly which subsidiaries were consolidated or which weren't consolidated, and how to account for the construction loan that built a much nicer headquarters, it seems, for a lot less money than the Clinton Foundation may have claimed that it spent. So there's a lot of stuff to look at here that weaves together the Clinton Foundation, this Heifer project, the main accounting firm BKD, a law firm that's involved everywhere, Wright, Lindsay and Jennings, an investment bank, Stevens Inc., that's involved in all of this. It's just one big unhappy, incestuous family engaged in fraud. And this guy, John Glasgow, by all accounts, was the rare straight shooter in Arkansas. And I'm sure there are many straight shooters, actually, but the rare straight shooter that had anything to do with Bill Clinton in Arkansas, who was tasked. This CDI was a joint venture between the Dillard's department store chain, which was very big, and this reputable guy, Bill Clark, who actually died in May of 2007. And the theory behind it was that the Dillard people, to grow, what they were basically doing is building store after store after store around the southeastern part of America. And they felt at one point they were getting ripped off by the different contracting firms. So they said, well, why don't we do this? We'll set up a joint venture subsidiary with someone we trust, Bill Clark, and we'll give Bill Clark's firm the right to build all our stores, and we'll get savings out of that. Then we'll encourage Bill Clark's firm to do other non-Dillard's work, i.e. the Clinton Foundation, and work for the Stevens Inc., and work for other people. So
they just figured the department store construction is so so expensive or whatever, they just start their own construction firm?
Well, I don't know if you've had experience with construction people, but it's, unfortunately, I've had a fair amount of experience, and it always starts out well. You get an architect to put something out for a bid, and you get 5 bids, and you throw out the high one and the low one, you interview somebody, you take the second from the top, whatever. You pick somebody, and it's all smiles,
right,
until you get involved in the project, and the contractor says, well, you didn't tell me that. Or we need to change this and that. And inevitably, the course of a construction contract is one that starts out with smiles and ends in tears, with nobody being happy. The client's not happy, with rare exceptions.
Well, it's similar to the film business, because it's the type of thing where once you start it, it's so expensive and so big that you can't just stop it and go to somebody else, so they've got you.
Right. Yeah. And so, in the case of Dillard's department stores, as a guess, and I have never even been to a Dillard's store, maybe they came up with, let's just do it more or less the same footprint everywhere we go.
Right.
We'll get economies of scale. The only thing we'll have to worry about is the local construction market for labor.
Right.
Are the people in Alabama going to be easier to work with than the people in Arkansas, the people in Louisiana, the people, And
I haven't really been to Dillard's. It looks like it's women's clothing.
It's all sorts of things, I believe. Men, you see, men, kids.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a big company. Now, so if we go back to the first page, actually, of the slides.
Oh, yes. Well, sure.
That's okay. All right. So John Glasgow, as it turns out, he disappeared on January 28th, 2008, early in the morning. And we're going to take you through, there are some accounts of what people believe may have happened at the time he disappeared. But if there were good investigators, and there are good investigators at the FBI, who, and elsewhere, if there were good investigators, they would be thinking about motive, means, and opportunity. They'd be thinking about what motives may be out there. Were there credible motives out there to get rid of this pesky accountant type, straight shooter, who wouldn't give up asking questions, which might have uncovered the largest fraud in history before it escalated to become as big as it is today? I think I'm going to show you that there are, just from what's in the public domain, there are ample reasons to say that the books and records of the Clinton Foundation up through really December 31st, 2009, are put together using the crapola method of accounting. I mean, there's
generally accepted crapola method.
Yeah, I mean, it's an indefensible set of accounts, right? That is just reeks of fraud. Rod Rosenstein, Dopey James Comey, and Bob Mueller, they couldn't see this fraud, or maybe they saw it and figured, rather than rat the Clintons out, we'll hold this over the Clintons, and we'll have all kinds of, advantages that we can get out of politicians in both parties. But for some reason, they didn't see the fraud in the 2001 to 5 period, John Glasgow would have been the point on the end of the spear seeing this fraud.
Right.
Because he was the top accounting guy for this joint venture. And this was a very big construction contract, a lot of publicity getting to it. And so he would have cared deeply if, perchance, the Clinton Foundation was saying in its crooked books that it paid Glasgow a lot more money than the CDI actually got from the Clinton Foundation. People would be asking questions. They'd be saying, look, the Clinton Foundation in its book said they spent $165 million on this thing, and you're telling me, John, that we only collected 80. Where's the other money? Did you steal it?
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Charles, because you've spoken in the past about, as a method, people doing this, reporting that, a higher amount was paid than what was actually paid. In the ideal scenario for the crooks, how does that work? I write, hey, I paid Charles $1 million when I actually paid you $100, and now I'm saying, well, since I paid the $1 million, I'm taking a tax write-off for the $1 million or something? Or what's the plan?
I'm just surmising, but as a guess, it involves what you're trying to do is rip off the Treasury, both the tax Treasury and the Treasury of whatever company would be writing the check. So you would go, there are many ways you could play this scam. One would be, we're in on the deal. I'm the contracting firm, and you're the crook inside the Clinton Foundation.
I'm Bill Clinton. You're the Arkansas Construction Company.
Right. And so what you need to do is you need to get, as Bill Clinton, you've got to get your dumbass chief financial officer, Andrew Kessel, to say that he's writing a big check to me, the construction firm. So we get the crooked Andrew Kessel, in theory, to sign off on a purchase order for $40 million. You approach Kessel, you get that paperwork. He gets a wire together for $40 million. He sends it to an account at the construction firm, only it's not really at the construction firm. I'm a crook, and I go across the street and I open a bank account with a slightly similar name to the real one, and that $40 million wire goes into the crooked bank account, and then I tell my boss at the construction company that I only got $19 million. And then you and Andrew Kessel and I go out for a round of golf, and in the back of the 12th hole, golf cart comes up and we split up, the cash.
But the construction company has to be on board with saying, oh yeah, we got the $40 million.
Absolutely would have to. And that's where I think this guy created the trouble. I think he was sitting there and saying, wait a minute. It turns out that his predecessor in the joint venture was found guilty of embezzlement. So he was brought in to really be the straight shooter to clean the place out, and he had a reputation for being a real straight shooter. I mean, there's a story that we linked to where he's the kind of guy who at this contracting firm, they had a monthly contest to encourage people to lose weight and give up smoking and drinking and stuff like that. And this guy won the contest, and then in 1 month, and then came in sheepishly a few weeks later and said, "Look, I need to give my $500 prize back because I'm now smoking again, and I shouldn't really be doing that, and I can't in good conscience take this $500 that you've already given me, which I could have spent." He was
he maybe even quit smoking then and won it. It didn't say you're not allowed to go back to it.
Right. Well, but the point is, he's that kind of
very
person.
Much of a straight arrow.
And it would make sense to me that this Dillard's firm, which set the contracting firm up in the first place, because they were sick and tired of being ripped off by all the contracting firms across the American South. They set it up, great fanfare. The first CFO is a crook. They get rid of him. They replace him with this guy.
Right.
And now we go down this project of building this Clinton Presidential Center, which is going to get tremendous attention right around the world. And no part of the accounts make any sense, as we'll go through in some detail in a few minutes. So a lot of people contact me one way or another, and they say, "Charles, why are you bringing all this stuff up? There's a statute of limitations. Nobody's ever going to do anything about it." There is no statute of limitations on murder.
Right.
And so you want to get this Clinton Foundation case front burner. You go and you send some real investigators, not the people necessarily who have been in Arkansas the whole time, people who are not afraid of the Arkansas Mafia, to go back over the ground of what was investigated in the past, what we now know, what we can discern when real investigators ask tough questions of the Clinton Foundation people, including their professional advisors, their accountants, their lawyers, and all those people with a real file, and real shovels and real rakes. We go back over this ground, and we will figure out, I think I'm going to show the investigators today, a pathway to see how you get to understand the real motives that likely were operating here.
Right.
So if we go into the second, this is, well, let's just quickly do that one.
Yep.
As in all our broadcasts, Jason and I take the same approach when we do these things together. We are showing you evidence, and we are giving you our assessment of the evidence. We're trying to put together working theories. We don't have 100% information on anything, but we have enough, I think, to make educated estimates and guesses about what likely actually really happened, as opposed to the Clintonian way of looking at it. So we provide you these links. You can reach me through that website and my Twitter, and Jason through his Twitter. We always encourage people to come up with concise suggestions. Tell us the headline of why your contact is, why we should focus on this, and then if you want to give us a lot of supporting information, do that afterwards. That's fine. We do our level best to get back to you.
Yes.
Then Jason is doing remarkable work, not simply in what we do together, but in other shows. He's put together a playlist for our shows, and I guess this is now our 80th broadcast.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to include this one in the standard playlist, because this isn't really a Sunday with Charles show, but I should also put together a Strange Death of show, because we've done Ron Brown, who, and it's not always Arkansas Clinton deaths, although
that was,
maybe it is, because
yeah.
it's Peter Smith.
And Vince Foster.
Well, we didn't do Vince Foster, although I would like to do that. We've got
John Ash we should do.
John Ash would be good. We've done Joe Rago, and he may have, in fact, been affiliated. But this, I was just showing briefly your Twitter page so we can reiterate that people should follow you there at Charles Ortel. And of course, the playlist for Sunday with Charles and Closing In is available on the link.
And one thing just for our viewers, you have this up on the 20th Century 3D, and
well, it's on
also
both, right?
And that's just the Sunday with Charles viewership. I think that you have to add the other one.
Right. So on 21st Century, so what happened was, just to reiterate, is that the original Crowdsource the Truth YouTube channel, which bears my name, received some anonymous malicious strikes and was unable to live stream. So live streaming got moved to Crowdsource the Truth 2, which then received its own malicious anonymous strikes. And so we're utilizing my legacy 21st Century 3D channel for streaming, and you are correct. We have all of our recent Sunday with Charles episodes there as well. So yeah, that's up to about 8,000 views from a day ago.
Which is better than solo.
Better than solo, right? Yeah, well, that's doing well. But it does show you the power of these malicious strikes. It's unfortunately a somewhat effective way to slow the viewership, but we're working hard to get the word out to people, to let them know that they can, of course, subscribe to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and then their live streams will not be interrupted by the malicious behavior of anonymous, obnoxious people who have nothing better to do than try to prevent us from bringing out information about wanton killing and rampant theft of money. I don't know who would possibly want us to not do that, Charles, other than the people engaged in those activities or people they hire.
Right. So this is a short diversion, but it's worth doing. While we were on air yesterday, our good friend, the accountant down in Virginia,
oh yes,
sent me a email. Thank you very much for that. We won't use his name. That there was a new part up of the Hillary R. Clinton dump, and I had the time this morning to go through it. It's over 400 pages. And it is a mega set of bombshells. It was released on May 30th, 2018. And what this shows is if this was received, this first bit of information, look when it was received. We go down, make this smaller, Jason. On the 28th of January 2016, that's when, just when that walk-in person came in, the senior person from the State Department.
Oh yeah.
It may or may not be the same stuff that came in connection with the mid-year exam, which is Hillary Clinton's investigation.
I just love seeing that written.
Yeah, but what this is, we don't need to go page by page through it, but what this is an extensive recounting of how upset the Obama administration and the State Department was with CNN, because CNN had apparently somehow managed to get a copy of Ambassador Stevens' diary.
Whoa.
And had read it and kept it and written stories alleging that Stevens was concerned for his personal safety. He didn't like the state of security. And also, this starts with this report, OSAC report, is a report that was issued prior to the 9/11/2012 date, several days before, which basically said that the State Department and the Obama administration didn't see any significant risk of anything happening on September 11th, 2012, days before something brutal did happen. So this is an extensive set of pages and emails back and forth, many of showing how the Obama administration was manipulating the press and trying to get the Wall Street Journal to write an article going after CNN, and back and forth. Philippe Rein's nasty comments to James Rosen, nasty comments to Michael Hastings. This is a long thing that dropped on May 30th, or was released on May 30th, and then it went up on the website. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or when, but this is the source of this is the FBI Vault. And to you at the FBI Vault who are doing this, keep the flow coming. You know, we'd love to see as much of this as possible. We would love to see the missing Clinton Foundation related emails, which certainly, there's some mention in here, and we'll get into the logistics in a second, of manipulating that was happening by the State Department to make sure that Mohammed Morsi actually spoke at the Clinton Global Initiative on September 24th, 2012, which he did.
Who is Mohammed Morsi?
We're going to get into that in a second. Mohammed Morsi is he's now still in jail, but he was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, and then he became president of Egypt on June 29th, 2012. And we've got a timeline we're going to go through and talk about it.
Wow.
But this, they didn't want, it was, remember 2012, remember the big thing that happened in 2012?
Benghazi.
No. Barack Obama needed to get reelected.
Oh.
Right, and if the truth had been known about Benghazi and about the degree to which the Middle East policies under the brilliant genius Hillary Clinton,
right.
You know, the Arab Spring and all that, and the reset with Russia, if the American electorate had known the truth, and if Mitt Romney had brought his A game after the first debate, you remember he slaughtered Obama in the first debate, and then somehow Obama came back off the ropes. And then Candy Crowley, remember, made Romney look stupid in one of the debates.
Romney made Romney look stupid.
Well, she basically, she was, I think she manipulated the news. Now remember, this is a 400 pages or so, which shows how furious the Obama administration and the State Department was with CNN and with Anderson Cooper. And so, is it possible that to get back in Obama's good graces, CNN said, all right, I'll tell you what, we'll make Romney look bad in these debates. But this, whatever actually happened here, this is more of a window into the ways in which the Obama administration manipulated the lamestream, gullible, bought and paid for corporate media. And it's on and on and on, emails back and forth. And it makes sense if you think about it. If you're in the business, if you've got a gigantic overhead at CNN or ABC or NBC, you know, you have to cover the President of the United States. Yeah. You have to cover an election campaign.
And if they restrict access, you're screwed.
And if they say, you know, we're not going to let James Rosen and Fox talk to anybody at the Obama administration anymore because you're asking the wrong type of questions. What's James Rosen going to do? You know? Yeah. And that kind of, there's not enough regulation of that back and forth.
Yeah, that can't be the way that works. I mean, you've just in a sentence basically described how the mainstream media must do whatever the hell these guys say.
Which is not right. I mean,
well, it's useless. It's a PR company.
Right, exactly. So anyway, this is something for people to read, and it's quite interesting because it goes deeply into, it has Brett Baer emails and James Rosen emails and all sorts of emails from famous, and Anderson Cooper. And
oh man, did they redact his email address? Probably.
They did not.
They didn't?
I don't, well maybe they did. I don't know how to go into this, and you know, maybe if you are more, it wouldn't be difficult to be more technically proficient than I am, but if you get into this, there's a lot of...
see, they release it so you can't search it.
But you know how to change that, right? Yeah. So anyway, if we could just go back into the slide for a second. The reason this is important is the timeline. Okay, and people, I wrote a piece about this, several in Washington Times. On June 3rd, 2012, that's when Uma Abedin began to work for all her different jobs, for Teneo, for the Clinton Foundation, for State Department, and for Hillary Clinton personally, okay? And here's the Chuck Grassley letter, you can see it for yourself, that describes all that. Morsi gets elected on June 29th, okay? Now remember, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, Barack goes to Cairo, and in a speech in Arabic, an raucous speech at Tahrir Square. I've been to Cairo many times, and I know that's like the center part of, it used to be the center of Cairo, I don't know if it still is. He gets all his excited followers together, and he says to them in Arabic, my #1 priority is to free the blind sheik. This
the
is
guy from Jersey City who wanted to
Yeah.
bomb the World Trade Center?
Yeah, who did bomb the World Trade Center on June 29th, 2012.
Oh.
That's his #1 priority. So you're
What
sitting
the hell?
there and you're thinking, okay, I'm Barack Obama's campaign manager and I got to raise money and I got to defend the proposition against Mitt Romney that our foreign policy was inspired, and this idea of, you know, toppling all of our friends across the Middle East, including the person in Egypt who preceded Morsi, was a smart idea. And Exhibit A in the counter argument has just happened on June 29th. We've got this knucklehead Morsi going and saying, wait a minute, I want to free the blind sheikh.
Why, though? What is he trying to ingratiate himself to Americans by wearing a Santa Claus hat?
No, I think that's a wind-up thing here. But
why would he want to free this guy?
Because he's anti-American, Morsi.
Oh, well, right.
Right,
So,
and you know, and they were selling us a bill of goods on Morsi, and it was the Obama administration, it was Valerie Jarrett, it was Hillary Clinton, all of whom were involved peddling a false narrative that the Muslim Brotherhood was a group of peace-loving people, that Morsi was a great person, and now this idiot gives a speech on June 29th, 2012, you know, in the run-up to the general election, saying my #1 job now that I've been made president, greased in by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, is to free the blind sheikh.
well,
How do you
luckily
defend
it
that?
didn't happen.
And if you go back into the slides, you know, I think we understand in this time frame why Uma Abedin had all these different jobs and why they were using secret servers and alias email accounts, because they didn't want the public to know just how diabolical this Clinton Foundation and Clinton initiatives were in the Middle East. And by the way, the person who was #2 for Mohammed Morsi had previously been, in the last job, a senior Clinton Foundation person, working for the Clinton Foundation in Egypt. You know, I mean, and none of this came out because the lamestream bought and paid for corporate media didn't want to report any of this in 2012 when it would have made a difference.
Charles, I think this is not a joke comment. This is a real comment, which I know is maybe rare for me, but I think what we need to do is start to assemble some sort of an infographic that shows all these people and how, like, I don't think most people even realize there was a Clinton Foundation in Egypt. And if they knew, it becomes so obvious that you've got this person working for the Clinton Foundation who then becomes the vice president of this and this. And
Right. And so then on the subject of films, you know, most people don't know that The Innocence of Muslims, the offensive cartoon, was initially put on YouTube between the 1st and 2nd of July, way before Benghazi, way before the riots. It went up on YouTube.
And that's what Hillary was blaming the attack on.
That's not just Hillary, you know, idiot
Andrew
Susan
McCabe.
Rice and all those people. Susan Rice goes on 5 Sunday talk shows and blames it on a cartoon, you know. But, you know, Morsi had already showed his true colors, I would argue, prior to June 29th. By the 9th of July, he starts making aggressive moves against the Supreme Court of Egypt, right? And what had happened was the history of the Muslim Brotherhood It was banned way, way back as, you know, it's a radical Islamist group. It was banned in Egypt because they assassinated people. And, you know,
Sadat,
and
right?
Morsi was the head of it, right? And not back then, but Morsi became the head of it and then became president of Egypt. So there people were, you know, not too excited, some of them, about letting this group get really powerful. And Morsi said, oh, don't worry, we're a different Muslim Brotherhood, you know, we're peace-loving, and this and that. He gets in on the 29th. He says he's going to push the United States to free the blind sheikh. By the 9th of July, he's moving against the judiciary. By the 13th of August, he's shaping up the military. Then you have the Republican National Convention in Florida, the 27th to 30th of August. Then you have this, in here there's a long, very detailed chronology of when innocence of Muslims played. It started to play in Egypt on the 1st, if you go back up, on the 1st of September, I believe. Yeah, sorry, September 4th, okay?
Who made this video?
This is this Christian guy, a Coptic Christian.
Sam Basile?
Yeah, who's I don't know if he's still in jail, but he was
for the video. He's in jail.
Absolutely.
Why? What was the video all about?
It was a cartoon that depicted Islam's Prophet Muhammad in a very negative light. But if you read it, I mean, if you're a movie expert, if you watch this thing, you'll look at it and say, this is crap.
But also, he's a U.S. resident. Why does he go to jail for posting a video?
Exactly. They need exactly. Those are a whole set of questions. You know, they railroaded this guy to shift the narrative away from the epic criminal misdeeds of the Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton State Department, upending the balance of power, creating a vacuum of power in the Middle East, letting all these radical Islamist groups increase their power, ushering in these flows of refugees back into the United States, but also into Europe, destabilizing Europe. This was a disastrous set of imperatives, and they needed to find somebody to blame. So instead of actually exposing the truth, you know, that the reason we have this secret set of servers and secret emails and alias email accounts is we don't want anybody to see the degree to which we're going to F up the world, starting in the Middle East, the volatile Middle East. Of course we got to let Hillary Clinton and Uma Abedin and all these people, you know, have, I wouldn't play this.
I'm not going to, but I just wanted you to see that the YouTube community, I mean, that's bound to get a strike.
Right.
I'm curious to see what's in it. I've never watched this video.
Yeah, let's not do it now.
No. Won't do it now. We'll come
anyway,
right
so then the Democrat convention happens just as this video is being played. Now, query, you know, who played this video? Could this have been a wind-up job? Could this have been, you know?
Yeah, what do we know about that guy?
We don't.
Sam Basile?
We don't know how. Did Morsi do this to distract, to shift blame to anti-Islamic thinkers? You know, to say, you know, this is to lend himself some legitimacy. I wouldn't, you know, with the Clintons, and frankly with the Obama administration and these people who don't care about right and wrong, you know, who love dirty tricks.
Yeah.
It would not surprise me to find out that this was a dirty trick. Well, then we get 4 dead Americans on September 11th, 2012. I saw this movie, and it's a fantastic movie, I think. And I think it's really worth people going to see and reading this book. These are some real heroes who have been viciously abused by the Obama administration, by Hillary Clinton, and so far by history. And then guess what? On the 26th of September, Mohammed Morsi shows up at the Clinton Global Initiative in New York to make his first international address before the pivotal November 2012 re-election. So he's given a friendly stage, and we have no emails that have been produced so far. The Hillary Clinton email fiasco showing any efforts to make sure that Morsi would show up, to arrange for his itinerary. No emails at all on this subject. There are no work-related emails, you know, having to do with the Clinton Global Initiative at any period of time. Even though Barack Obama spoke at most of them, Bill Clinton and Hillary spoke at many of them. You know, a lot of Clinton Foundation donors were lauded at these different things. A lot of government people, U.S. government people attended these things. A lot of the mainstream media was involved. No Clinton Global Initiative emails, because we've turned over all work-related and potentially work-related emails. You could trust us. We both graduated from Yale Law School.
But we know that they just put up a photo that says, hey, New York City, 6 o'clock, there's going to be a Clinton dinner, and everybody just knows where to go.
That's right.
You don't need emails about it.
Exactly. You got mind mails. But anyway, this is hats off to the line people in the FBI, but that's for a separate subject to do maybe on Wednesday. So
Sure.
Back to John Glasgow. Now this is, I've talked in the past about the great fortune I had to be in Daniel Halper's movie that was done on Clinton Inc. This is an excerpt from page 135 to 136, and it talks about January 2008. What happened in January 2008? January 28th, 2008, John Glasgow went missing on January 28th.
Right.
Here we have Hillary struggled, Bill Clinton was making disastrous headlines, his complex and largely mysterious financial relationship with Ron Burkle. Okay?
I haven't heard that name too much.
Ron Burkle is the supermarket leveraged buyout king who created a fund, multiple funds called UKIPA, bought all sorts of things, and used Bill Clinton's connections to score investments from international governments like the ruler of Dubai and other.
Sheikh Maktoum.
And he also is a bit of a ladies' man.
Oh, so she'd get along well with Billy Boy.
Exactly. They're both getting along very well for a while.
So this is him.
Yeah.
And back to the slides, of course.
Yeah.
Oops.
Okay. So, so that's the first. But then read this. Hillary was having money troubles of her own. She had raised over $100 million for the 2008 race, and had spent it all by January 2008. So she'd spent all the money that she had raised, had blown it, just at the time that this guy John Glasgow, a chief financial officer, is asking tough questions about where did the money go that was sent towards the Clinton Foundation that was supposed to be used to build the presidential complex. How come none of these financial statements make any sense? Just when she ran out of money, just when she was at her point of maximum political peril, this dude disappears on January 28th.
Chief financial officer.
Chief financial officer who would have had a sense of where the money was. And when you look through the primaries that, she got smoked in the caucus in Iowa. No one expected Obama to win that. That helped him a lot. She got smoked in South Carolina. She came back in New Hampshire, but then looking ahead to Super Tuesday, Obama smoked her. And so she had blown all this money. She was running a horrible campaign. This upstart Obama is getting the better of her. And this guy, this miserable priest, John Glasgow, is asking tough questions. He won't give up. He's asking and asking and asking, and somebody decides, well, maybe he should leave the earth.
Right.
So there are some other links in here that Daniel had in his book that I just provide you, so you don't have to read the footnotes. These are his sources for these comments.
Right.
Now, as this happened this morning, Bill managed to make some absurd comments confirming that he really didn't have any money. He claimed he was $16 million in debt when he left the White House. So there were money pressures early on for
How
Hillary
did
to
they
skip
get
it.
into such debt? Everything is paid for when you're the president. What's the debt?
I have no clue how they could run to that kind of money. But here's Bill Clinton in a, I think, taped interview defending today. Say somebody asked him a few tough questions, something like, it's if you had been president when the Me Too movement that exists today in 2018 was as strong as it is today, would you have done anything different in your relationship with a very young intern as the most powerful man in the world? And he said, nah, I wouldn't. Actually,
More
no.
cigars.
More cigars, yeah. And
Would have used a Cohiba.
that's right. And
Bill.
he's not looking too good.
Well, he's getting up there. He's had heart surgery. Plus, according to his brother, he's got a nose like a vacuum. So I don't think cocaine is too good for your health.
Right.
Roger Clinton actually said that on an FBI recording.
It's all right.
Yeah, he said, I got to get some extra for my brother. He has a nose like a vacuum. Then he went to jail for cocaine trafficking and was later pardoned by Bill Clinton.
And he's doing the Clapper head touch thing, right?
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and that's from his deposition that they didn't want viewed. But anyway, the timing here, Bill Clinton was thought of as being, the Clintons are supposed to be epic campaigners. See that
touching the face is
not a smart move.
A lie, a liar's tell.
Right. Yeah. But anyway.
Oh yes, he has his new book coming out.
He has this new book, and he's done
Book.con. Yes, he's conning everyone, even with the book.
and he's done it with James Patterson, who's a gifted mystery writer and has a gigantic audience. So the book, I'm sure, will sell well. But now he's going on a book tour, and he's going to get these type of questions every day.
Well, I'm glad that he was at BookCon, Charles, because it just reminds me of our video from the other day about the wrath of Khan.
Right.
I just bring that graphic up for a moment. I don't want to confuse people. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be getting humorous. We need to talk about the strange death of John Glasgow.
So if we go back into the slides there, and let's, what we've done here, I'm not going to talk people through all of these slides, but Jason and I pulled up a number of news stories that give you a sense of who this Glasgow character actually was. First of all, he was healthy. He was in his 30s.
Yeah. Happily
married, in good financial condition. And so there are not a lot of reasons in his personal life for him to disappear. The report that came out, as Jason mentioned, is inconclusive. It doesn't reach a determination as to why he died.
I'm in the process of trying to obtain that report so that we can share it with Dr. Rudd and possibly John Shirley. Dr. Rudd being, of course, medical examiner, John Shirley, former homicide detective. We'll get some professional insights from those guys.
But here's what was going on. He was this chief financial officer for this portion of Dillard's department store, which in 2008, Dillard's was under enormous pressure. Its finances were hemorrhaging. It wasn't doing well. Its stock price had plunged. There were 2 investment funds that were trying to change the management. And this piece of it was a small piece of a big company, Dillard's. But what had happened is in May of 2007, Bill Clark, the guy who had been the Clark in CDI, Clark Dillard's, he died young. And there was a change of control provision in the arrangement with Dillard's where they're giving Dillard's the right to buy out CDI, the 50% that the Clark family had owned. And so the question, and when you do these buy-sell arrangements, it matters bigly, as Donald Trump would say, what was the financial condition of CDI? If CDI was overstating its revenue and it inflated its earnings to help the Clinton Foundation, cover up its fraud, then that, continuing to misaccount for that would have a very material impact on the purchase price assigned to buying out Bill Clark's piece. So Dillard's would have an interest, actually, in exposing that. If they had the right to buy Clark's heirs out, they'd be happy to find fraud, and then they could use it to drive the price down.
So let me ask you if I understand this correctly. The plan was, hey, we'll bribe somebody at this construction company to say we're paying them more than we actually are, and we'll give that person some amount of money in secret just for them to motivate them to do a fraud on their own company and figure out some way to hide this missing 20 or 100 million or whatever.
I think it was more like we've already taken care of BKD. Okay, BKD is the accounting firm. Okay, they audit the Clinton Foundation, they audit Heifer, they audit the city of Little Rock. Who knows who else they audit in Little Rock? Right. So we made sure that the accounting firm isn't going to ask any tough questions, right? And so no one's really going to check these numbers because we put somebody into the IRS, Lois Lerner, who is going to make sure that nobody at the IRS questions these numbers, and we have our spies into the Attorney General's office in Little Rock and in the local district attorneys and the police and maybe even the FBI office. So nobody's going to ask any questions. And the real game here is, since nobody's going to ask any questions and nobody's going to look too carefully at these financial statements, which we're not even going to share on our website, we're going to hide them from the public, even though you have to, under New York and California law, we'll explain in a second, you have to disclose them. We're just going to say anything that we want and steal as much as we can. That's basically the game plan.
And they figured no one will be looking because they have all bases covered, but they didn't account for what you just described, which is this guy dying, and now suddenly they're selling, his family wants to sell his shares. He didn't know about it in the first place, but there's a whole other set of auditing going on that they didn't account for.
And here's this guy, John Glasgow. Typically, I did a lot of this kind of work, not the crooked work, but buying and selling of companies in my 20s and 30s. And what happens then is the chief financial officer of a business that itself might be sold, has to, and where the management of the business may want to buy the business, is under enormous pressure. He works for somebody, who may have an interest in buying the company cheaply, and he's got to basically be honest. He's got to say, look, I work for you, Jason, but I have a responsibility to all the creditors and shareholders and lenders and customers, the community, et cetera. I'm going to walk right down the middle of the fairway here. I'm going to do just what's right. I'm not going to go over here, and I'm not going to go over there. I'm going to tell everybody the same thing. I'm not going to make a case that this thing is a piece of garbage and therefore it should be worth nothing so that the management team can buy it, right? I'm not going to go along with Dillard's if they're going to make that. I'm going to show what really happened here, and I'm going to place the blame squarely on the people involved. If there were adjustments made to these books at the Dillard corporate level that I didn't know about, because I'm just giving you what I saw in CDI level, and there's some crooks in Dillard's, who had found out about this and were happy to play along because it gave them chits against the Clintons.
Holy shit.
Exactly. So this is a very complex matter.
Right.
And it's certainly, what I see so far, I don't see, you hate to see a chief financial officer who lists as a hobby going to Vegas, gambling, or horses, drugs.
Doesn't seem like the kind of thing that most CFOs are into. The ones that I've met have always been like, what do you mean you're spending $5 on that?
$5? What about this 2-cent extra wrapper that you got for your candy bar
That's
or whatever?
That's the type of guys I've dealt with in those positions.
So if we just go back into the slide, so I can keep, So here's a story worth pulling up, this Fox News story. Somebody does a story March 16th, 2008. So this is, Hillary's still a live candidate at this point. And this has a lot of color in it, saying that the guy felt overwhelmed. There was a special audit, and he was being, I think, accused of, there's something wrong with these numbers, John. Explain to us what's wrong with the numbers.
Was he?
I don't think he was involved in any negative stuff. But here you see, he was the kind of guy who paid back a $500 bonus he got for completing an anti-smoking program because he started to light up again. This is in Fox. So I think it's credible, actually. For CNN, not so much.
Well, it's also the kind of detail that, why would they put that in there unless somebody, that doesn't sound made up, but he's been missing since January 28th. Now this is from when? Oh yeah, 2008.
Now, but just let me go back to that for a second. In our last broadcast where we talked about the UK, on March 12th, 2008, the Clinton Foundation, Andrew Kessel, crooked Bruce Lindsay, and crooked Diana Noble filed an application that was approved in the United Kingdom to set up the Clinton Foundation to engage illegally in international HIV/AIDS, climate change, diet-related stuff when they had no authority.
Going to the bank.
They had no authority to do that, but they did it 4 days before this was happening. And then 15 days after this is when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts involuntarily revokes the right of the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation to operate in its most important headquarters location in Massachusetts. So I mean, this is a very fraught with peril moment where Hillary Clinton still is probably up there in Chardonnay, the Chardonnay room, up there in Chappaqua, believing that she's going to be the next president of the United States.
Now wait a minute. So the family was saying that he's easygoing and 45, but felt overwhelmed and anxious about the audit. But the company says no money is missing. So this is consistent with him having pressure applied to him to do something that he knows is not the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Some kind of compulsion, some kind of blackmail. This is his brother talking.
Are we ready to talk a little bit about the brother?
Well, let me go through this train of thought. You see, but this is a lot of color that tells me that you don't just say, well, the guy left and his remains show up a month before Hillary announces for president for the second time. Let's not worry about it. Nothing here. It's from 2008. Who cares? And by the way, right around this time of this story, Dillard's restates its earnings.
And?
Because of a problem, an $11.4 million problem with CDI in the 2005 to 6 time frame, which is exactly when the books are going to show you the books, or the crooked books of the Clinton Foundation, where there are multi-million-dollar problems in the Clinton Foundation's books relating to accounting for the construction of the presidential complex.
So, but you're saying them restating, they're just saying, hey, we figured out something was wrong, it's 11 million less?
I'll show you in a second.
Okay, all right.
So if we go back in there,
right.
Let's just see, we've put up, as 19th of March they restated, we put up, I think, pictures of the Clinton Presidential Center. Let's put up this heifer. This is the world headquarters that was built also by CDI around the same time. Completed January 2006. Take a look at this thing.
Looks good.
Looks better than the Clinton Foundation. Then go look how much it cost.
What does it say?
I think it's like 20 million.
Where does it tell you that?
It's either here or in the audit.
Green building also.
I think it was about 20 million.
20 million. Is it larger?
It's certainly comparable. I mean, there's...
It looks bigger by a lot.
Yeah. So why 165 million for one thing and 20 for another?
165.
For one and 20 for another.
Well, so I mean, we've got our, maybe, I don't know, the landscaping on the Bill Clinton roof deck, patio bar.
That was, actually that stuff was done in 2007, and that's something that maybe, I don't know if CDI did that or didn't do it, but that's something that, you know, if it would change the reported gross property, plant, and equipment of the Clinton Foundation in that year, 2007, a year when Glasgow is probably puzzling over the books and saying, what actually happened here?
It is a huge discrepancy that this one is 20 and the Clinton building is 165. I mean, we're just looking at pictures of them, so it's hard to gauge, but certainly this glass thing for the heifers looks pretty large and everything.
And you got this pond here, or whatever. I mean, you know, the thing of it is, those of us who've been around sniffing out fraud, you tell me that there's a company you're suspicious of whose biggest activity in the years that you're suspicious of it was building a construction project in a notoriously corrupt part of the country, Little Rock, Arkansas, and you tell me that the audits don't exist and there's all kinds of discrepancies, but you're fine with it, okay? That tells me that you're, not you obviously, Jason, but anybody saying that to me is a crook. Yeah. It's an obvious crook.
Yeah.
Rosenstein, Mueller, Comey should have seen this coming a long time ago. So we go back into the slides here. I'll show you the press release. Here's the announcement from Dillard's, and if we scroll through it, you'll get to the piece on...
Sorry, I lost my mouse there.
It's okay.
This one.
Yep. Your mouse is going chasing another cheese.
Right.
So it's this is the kind of stuff that I regularly would have to read, not the beautiful pictures, but if you go down.
Dillard's always begins with a beautiful model.
Right, to distract you. And then this talks about net income, management comes, keep going down a little bit. Sales, cost of sales, interest and debt expense. Here we go. The company owns a 50% interest in CDI, a construction company which does construction work for the company and for third parties. The company discovered that CDI had recorded profit on the company's construction process in excess of what CDI had previously reported to the company. So they'd overstated their profits. Okay. And this is a period going back to January of 2005. Because the cumulative effects of this area would be material, the company selected to restate its opening retained earnings as of January 29th, 2005, precisely when this restatement is 11.2 million and it dates back to January 29th, 2005, precisely when the Clinton Foundation was cooking its books. January 29th, 2005, they were still using an absurd basis of accounting. They had never done an audit for their operation. And here, CDI is restating because they've overstated their income by 11.2 million. Now, CDI is, I don't know if this 11.2 is just Dillard's share, so 50%, so whether you take the 11.2 and it's 22.4 and Dillard's is saying, wait, our share of the overstatement is 11.2, or whether the whole Overstatement is 11.2. We don't yet know that, but this is a big enough number, 11.2 million. And problems, as I'm going to show you, are epic with the Clinton Foundation. You know, this is material to the Clinton Foundation disclosures, and the Clinton Foundation frauds are material to the Dillard disclosures, as I will show you.
No one has discussed this before, Charles, so that I'm aware of.
No, I know. I've been waiting because I wanted to make sure that people were steeped in the foundation fraud side of it.
Right.
Okay. Now, here's a story about how incestuous the relationship is in the New York Post.
Gotta love the Post.
It's a paper of record. But it goes and it talks endlessly about complex relationships among Dillards and Stevens and the Clark and the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons and Little Rock. And, you know, it's just one crooked city, Little Rock, it would seem.
Yeah.
And see, the stock has plunged nearly 80% in 2008. Dillard's is under assault. They're trying to, there's a proxy battle in May.
Oh, it's based in Little Rock.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized that. Interesting. Huh. They hired Stevens, Little Rock-based investment bank. We've heard of that before too. That's what Hillary used to buy the pork futures or the cattle futures, right?
Stevens are the ones who sold bonds to raise money to buy the land that became land used, no, for the Clinton Foundation.
Ah.
They sold a bunch of bonds in 1998 to do that. I mean, Stevens is ever, to be fair, the Stevens people are billionaires. There are not that many billionaires in Arkansas, and they all know one another. The Dillards, the Walmart people, the Waltons, all these people know one another. And Stevens is a bipartisan, financier of the swamp. He finances the Republicans, he finances the Democrats, he finances anything
swamp
that
financing.
He can. So you read through this and you say, well, there are obviously a large number of conflicts of interest here, and there's every likelihood that the Stevens people don't want you to get to the bottom of what really was going on with this Clinton Foundation for many reasons.
Yeah, they're involved.
Right. So if you then go into the slides, you discover that Dillard's in the end buys out the 50% interest that was held by the Clark family on August 29th, 2008, thereby putting it in a position to sweep all this stuff under the rug.
That's what I was going to ask. Are they just trying to make it go away?
Right. Now, the thing of this is, I know from my work, actually, I started out in 1980, the first several projects I did were all involving construction companies, and big construction companies. And then later, personally, I did some construction projects.
Oh, so he's already missing when they do this.
Yeah. He goes missing January 28th, 2008. Dillard's announces they have a problem March 19th, 2008 with CDI, they restate, and then on August 29th they buy out the Clark interests. So there's a lot of stuff, there's going to be a lot of correspondence in the files here about what was the real state of CDI, how do you value CDI, what was the impact of the Clinton Foundation construction project and the Heifer project on CDI's books in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8. All these are questions that you should be able to get answers to.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And that real investigators, forensic accountants from the FBI and other independent people should be asking here. So now let's go for fun into the Clinton Foundation books, which is the next page.
Okay.
All right. Now, this, this is, I could have made the entire page red. I got nothing against red, but everything about the Clinton Foundation books is wrong. Everything. Okay. You start with when you're trying to give somebody books of account, you have to decide first of all, is the entity the legal entity that you're auditing, does it exist? I mean, is it really?
Is it properly legally a corporation or whatever?
No, a step before that, not proper. Does it even exist? Right, because you're putting your name, when you put BKD's name, it's a big accounting firm, on an audit that says, our firm has reviewed the books and records of the Clinton Foundation, and the damn thing doesn't even exist, okay, you are definitely part of the fraud.
Right.
And so in this case, I went from 97 to 2006, and we could do more years, but from 97 to 2006, we list out the revenues. You'll see on the extreme right, in every year the revenues are more than $3 million, okay?
Yes.
In every year under New York and California law, this sucker had to have a real audit, not a BKD flim-flam audit, where you address in 2001 through 4, they addressed the audit to the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, Inc. period, an entity that doesn't exist. There's no such thing.
And obviously, an accounting firm, they must know that. I mean, your accountant has all your bank crap, and they'd be like, wait a minute, you're not even incorporated.
I mean,
how did that happen?
Well, can't ask Hillary about it, but but the point is that it's obvious when you look at the starting place that they didn't put a real accountant on this. They got actually the name, I shouldn't make fun of the names, it's not the guy's fault, but the name of one of the accountants that was on this case is, of all things, Ernie Skirmy.
No.
Which is Ernie Skirmy. What a great name for a crooked accountant. But anyway, as a guest, the team at BKD was basically told, look, Bill Clinton's going to be the first lady. Hillary's going to be president of the United States. And when that happens, Arkansas is going to be platinum and gold central. We are going to get whatever we want from the Clintons when they get back in the White House. This time they're going to have money. We saw what happened from 93 to 2001, January to January. This is going to be Hillary's turn. We know how Hillary likes her dimes. I mean, she's somebody who's so interested in making money, so she's trading pork futures while she's giving birth to Chelsea Clinton.
Cattle.
I mean, imagine what she'll do if she's in the White House, this team of people who've got the Clintons, they got dirt on the Clintons, they're all thinking. So in 97, October 23, 97 to December 31st, 97, when the company was formed, William J. Clinton, the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, it did not submit a tax return for that so-called short period, which it had to do, okay? And by failing to do that, it is exposed. I would argue there's no statute of limitations here because they didn't file that return.
Why does that make it no statute?
Well, that's the way the tax laws work. The statute of limitations does not operate to your benefit if you fail to file a return that you should have filed. And in this period, October 23, 1997 to December 31st, 1997, speaking of Monica Lewinsky, which Bill Clinton was doing, this is precisely when Bill was getting together with a Clinton Foundation director, Vernon Jordan, and encouraging Monica Lewinsky to lie under oath. This is exactly when this was happening, October 23, 1997. There's multiple press accounts of meetings that Monica had in this timeline. In this timeline, the second presidential inaugural committee had a big slush fund that had not been, nobody really knows what happened to it, and there's a suspicion that slush fund was used to buy the silence of Monica and other people, to pay for private investigators, to intimidate people like Kathleen Willey and others. So this is a very important time frame in here, October 23rd, 1997 to December 31st, 1997. When they haven't filed the tax return, they don't have an audit, okay? In 98, 99, 2000, what Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton did is they used this presidential foundation to raise money, but they did not account properly. I don't think they only raised $3,050,000 in 98 or about the same amount in 99. I don't believe that for a second.
And also they're raising $3 million to make a building that cost $160. That's pathetic.
Well, it's tough to do when you're still the president. There's rules and restrictions on what the president can do. He can't be out there as president of the United States asking for money. There's public
He was
corruption
president
rules
until 2000.
until January of 2001.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, we know that the Clinton Foundation tax filings are riddled with errors in this time frame. We know that they solicited in multiple states without disclosing properly the defects in Bill Clinton's record and the foundation's record. They broke all kinds of state laws in this time frame, and they never produced an audit for 97, 98, 99, or 2000. None are issued. The principal illegal activities are around fundraising in this time frame. Okay? The way I built this slide, because I didn't want to have too many words, is when you move into 2001, their illegal activities are fundraising plus domestic, expanding into activities that you shouldn't be doing, like helping in Harlem. They had no authority to be in New York, no authority to do stuff in Harlem to help businesses. And then by 2002, Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton are flying around the world and doing all sorts of illegal activities that are not accounted for properly. Then, as far as audits are concerned, not a single one of the pieces of paper that were ultimately produced by BKD regarding 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not one of them was compliant with the law. Not a single one of them, okay? And in the beginning, if we go back up to the top of the page, they use this modified cash basis of accounting, which technically you're allowed to use modified cash basis of accounting if you do it consistently, but your standard choices are cash, the way an entrepreneur thinks about a business, how much cash do I have in my checking account and savings account, is a very aggressive way of accounting for something.
Or accrual?
Or accrual is the other way, where you say, I've just signed a contract with BKD where I've obligated myself to give them $165 million. I got nothing in the bank. I should show my creditors, including BKD, not BKD, CDI, the construction firm, that I just entered into a contract with you to give you $165 million, and I got like $1 in my accounts.
Right.
You should probably not give me too much credit. So anyway, they should have used the accrual method.
So accrual is more honest.
It comes closer to the truth. What you do there is there's no way of accounting for anything perfectly. There are always rounding errors and changes of judgment calls that you make about reserves and the discount rate, all sorts of things that you have to do to arrive at the estimate that becomes an audit. But there are ways.
There's a straight way to do it.
There's a straight way, and there's the Clinton way. Okay.
Right.
So if you were sitting with an accounting firm saying, look, here's my project. This is to honor a person who has $16 million in debt, having spent 8 years as president defending himself against all kinds of lawsuits, who has now had to sign several orders surrendering his law license for lying under oath in serious matters, impeding and obstructing justice. He was giving up his Arkansas law license, and he's giving up his Supreme Court law license, and we want to honor this guy and let this guy be involved with a foundation that we're going to name after him, but because he has all these defects in the record, he would have to disclose many of these defects in places like New York and California if he were going to be fundraising, but he's not going to do that. In fact, what he's going to do is he's going to have secret offices he's not going to tell you about, and he's going to go off and do things that he's not going to disclose to you. But nonetheless, we'd really like you to do us a solid here, and why don't you do our accounts for you?
Right.
For us, So if we go back down, up on the top here, this is lifted from accounting materials which are purposely excluded from the Clinton Foundation website. Okay.
When you say it's lifted,
this is just, I copied this off of the missing audits for 2001 through 4.
Oh, you got them from the IRS, or?
I got them from, where did I get them from now? It's got so much stuff. I think they were found in various state filings.
Got it.
Okay, but read this thing in red. Therefore, accounts and pledges receivable, payables and accrued revenues and expenses are not reflected in the financial statements. Accordingly, the statements are not intended to present financial position or changes in net assets in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles.
This is a complicated way of saying this is a nonsense document that tells you nothing.
Yeah, well, the key word is intended. The trustees intended to give you a financial statement that does not comply with the law. We didn't do it unintentionally. We intended to do it this way. We're not going to keep track of our long-term accounts receivable, our payables, the construction project, any of that. We're not going to do it right because that wouldn't allow us to steal as much money as we need to steal to finance these various campaigns in 2002, 4, 6, and 8, right? So this is just, for we nerd accounting types, you see this and you say, come on, guys.
But it's another example of the type of thing that the average person sees that and is like, okay.
No, but this is of a small bit of training, and you see it right away. You go down here. So the first audit that had this language was dated March 1st, 2002. That happens to be the date, March 1st, 2002, that they signed. Sorry, Donald. They signed the lease with the city of Little Rock, a 99-year lease
for that
land, obligating this bankrupt foundation with all sorts of problems to spend over $100 million at that point in time.
So they don't own that land that it's on.
It's leased from the city of Little Rock. And of course, the lease, which is a material document, binds the Clinton Foundation for 99 years to do and another renewal, to do spend all kinds of money. Is that on the Clinton Foundation website? Of course not.
Well, I mean, you can understand why the city of Arkansas or city of Little Rock would want that, but what happens after 99 years? Is there ever like a presidential library, like, lost our lease, having a sale.
They get another
Lyndon
99
Johnson's underwear marked down.
Another 99-year extension.
Yeah.
But so then there's a similar document from the 2nd of May 2003, another one 5th of March 2004, and then the final one is dated 30th June 2005. We're now going to show you the errors in these documents.
And the numbers have substantially gone up.
Way up.
3 million to
Right.
57.
Right. And just the rhythm of this, you're able, when you look into the details, you're able to discover that they really didn't start moving a lot of earth around in Little Rock to get this thing up and running until mid-June, July 2002.
You mean for real moving earth construction style?
Yeah, really. I mean, if you've been around a big job site like this, you know, you create all kinds of mess and dirt, and if what you're trying to do is create a building to house white paper and, you know, fancy crap in exhibits, you don't want all kinds of dust and dirt and mud and
So
slime.
they do landscaping around.
Well, the point is that you would have to finish the construction well before you start moving the stuff into the building.
Right.
You can't be saying, all right, look, I'll tell you what, I'm a half-assed job, there's dust everywhere, dirt everywhere. These are the National Archives.
History, yeah.
These are the only papers that exist at the Clinton Foundation. We're going to let you, you know, have all kinds of mysterious workmen in and out of this place with no security, while these papers, which of course the Clintons wouldn't want to hide anything that's incriminating about the period 1993 to 2001. You just can't do it that way. You'd have to finish this, you'd have to have security.
But loads of generic people walking around in construction uniforms, papers going in and out, loose security, anything.
That wouldn't be the way they would have done it. They, as a guess, there are records that are going to show that this building was largely complete way before November 18th, 2004. And that's relevant as we get now into considering the flows of money that are in the accounting statements, okay? So if we go to the next slide. Okay. This is the actual balance sheet, all right, that they produced for the period they claim for the 31st of December 2005. And what I've done here, because people I know are not necessarily numbers people, is I'm taking you through the key entries here. There's a lot of minutia we could do, but I'm going to start in this presentation, because we only have so much time, giving you the high points, the big reasons why this is total BS, okay? So in cash, they say they had $6.4 million in cash on December 31st, 2005. That's because they'd succeeded in stealing tens of millions of dollars before that date and getting it outside the Clinton Foundation books, okay?
How do you know that?
I will show you in detail. Then they take credit for having $26.3 million worth of cash for the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. They're not allowed to do that. You can't create a foundation that's supposed to raise money for an endowment and
then hold
library,
it in cash.
and then go to somebody else and say, look, I don't have the authority to help on Katrina. I didn't have that in my legal paperwork. Why don't you let me just raise as much money as I can for this disaster? And I'm not even going to keep track of it. You know, we're not even going to do the paperwork correctly. We've done several shows on this already.
But is it a problem that they're raising money and they're just letting it sit there in cash?
It's a massive problem.
Yeah.
In this time frame, you know, people, there's all we've done this before, that there all kinds of people are, I love this phrase, kvetching, my Horace Mann days, about the fact that, you know, all this money was raised, but it didn't go to
there.
anybody
Right.
in Katrina. And yet it's sitting on the balance sheet here of the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock. They claim they had $26.3 million. Nobody really knows how much they raised. Okay?
Crazy.
That shouldn't have been in the books. They shouldn't have raised that money, and it should have been accounted for as an agency transaction if it were done lawfully, which it wasn't.
What do you mean should be excluded?
This has nothing to do with the mission of the library and the right. And
so it should be excluded from the books of the William J. Clinton Foundation.
You would put a footnote in. If you had the legitimate right to raise the money, you would do this as a footnote. You would say, you know, the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation was established on October 23rd, 1997 to endow and construct a library and research center to be located in Little Rock, Arkansas, on a purpose-built complex to house the presidential records created or received during Bill Clinton's 2 terms of president. Full stop. It has no authority to do any other purpose, okay? Now, if they'd done this properly, they would have gone to George W. Bush and they would have said, all right, you want us to raise this money, we actually can't do it. Why don't you let us amend our articles of incorporation to give us this expanded purpose? They would have gone through that drill, And that's when they would have had to explain, well, whoops, we can't do that because we already broke the law, getting into fighting HIV/AIDS and climate change. We haven't told you about that. So they couldn't go down that track. So this shouldn't have been in the balance sheet. And the question is, how much money really went into the Clinton Foundation books in New York, in Arkansas, and elsewhere? Did they only raise $26.3 million, or did they raise a lot more money than that, is my suspicion. And was that money hived off later to fund Hillary's Senate campaign in 2006, to fund ultimately her presidential aspirations in 2008? This is a huge red flag. Okay?
You know, Charles, I don't know if you've ever watched Breaking Bad, but one of the problems he runs into there after he becomes very successful at being a criminal is he has so much money, he just doesn't have any place to put it. And it seems like these guys might have a similar problem.
Right. I wouldn't doubt it. So accounts receivable is a very small number. We don't need to talk about it. Contributions receivable, I don't think that they have accounted for all of the monies that they had gotten pledges for. I think this number is too low, 15.7, and I think the FBI and real investigators can figure out what the real number is by cross-checking what donors pledged, and what they said in their books. Then we get inventories of peanut, investments are small. Then we see this $135.3 million for the complex. Now, we told you that the heifer thing might have cost around 20. Okay, now why is it the penthouse, or the penthouse trappings for Bill Clinton made out of, I don't know, lapis lazuli and platinum and
what is that?
I don't know, some expensive stones or whatever. So this is, we will show you in a second how I estimate how much overvalued this is, and you can do that. The depreciation figure is, I would argue, wrong. There was never a real valuation done of this complex. When you spend money on a construction project, you're not allowed, once you get your certificate of occupancy, you're not allowed to say, well, I spent $180 million overpaying for all this kind of stuff. Of course it's worth what I spent. No, you've got to get somebody who says, how much is this presidential library worth, you know, under an assumption that it is a grant was made by a validly organized and operated presidential foundation. How much is this thing worth given that they spent whatever they claim they spent? And then a truly independent person looks at it and says, well, you know, tough luck. You spent 135. This is worth $16 million or $40 million. Just because you spent the money doesn't mean it's worth it. And so that work was never done. It's a gross oversight. It's the biggest piece of the balance sheet, $135 million out of $180.9 million. You can't say that, oh, well, you know, what?
That's glaring.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the most important piece of the foundation, and you said, yeah, because it's so important, I'm going to F it up. I'm going to do it all wrong, okay? So then you go down these other things. Accounts payable and accrued, I'm going to show you this was a fudge number, it's an invented number. I'll show you how I can prove it. Long-term debt is not stated properly. They fudged with that. And in consequence, the key numbers, total net assets, liabilities, and this is akin to equity, all of these numbers in total capitalization, they're all wrong, badly wrong. And they're not wrong by like a dollar, okay? I'll show you on the next page how large the errors may be, okay? So by my calculations, and I'm just estimating, I think they overstated the construction costs by around $40 million. And I'll show you how we get to that number. I can tell you categorically that they stole $36 million. We've done this before. We might hit this blue link. That's the second big thing. We've taken people through in the past through this, but in respect to 2004, this is the tax return. Okay, notice at the top you're asked, where does it ask the accounting technique? Yeah, F, accounting method. It says cash, accrual, or other. They should have marked other because they used modified cash.
They should have put a U next to this F.
That's right, FU to accounting. We don't need to do that. We're not doing those stinking accounting.
And other.
And this is not the real name of the Clinton Foundation. It's the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. The post office box is not the real address.
How do you know that?
Because you have to file a formal address form.
Oh, you can't use a post office?
Well, you can, but you have to go through a process in Arkansas when you register a corporation where you say what it's registered. This says number and street or post office box of mail is not delivered to the street address. but the mail is exclusively distributed to.
So you're not allowed to do it.
You're not allowed to do it this way, but they do it this way because Lois Lerner runs the IRS department at this point.
How do you know that mail is delivered to that address?
To a different address, because we have forms sent from multiple states across state lines to multiple state regulators at different addresses. 303 President Clinton Avenue, Suite, whatever, umpty-ump different addresses, right? So they probably thought no one would ever check this. Well, if we go to the next page, the next page, the next page.
There was
All right, there was
number.
Ernie Skirmy, I think, by the way. I don't know if that's Ernie Skirmy or not, but anyway.
It does say CPA, right?
Yeah, it does.
Title.
But here we go down here. All right, look at this. Grants and allocations. Do you see this number here? This is a little accounting quiz. It's not a trick question. What is the total amount of grants and allocations?
$45,331,227.
And how much of that was in cash, and how much was in the form of non-cash?
It says all cash.
Right.
How the hell did $45 million in cash get donated?
It didn't. 36 million of this was the grant to NARA. So this is a gross fraud right here. Saying
the grant to what?
To the National Archives. So the
But
value.
it's cash?
It wasn't cash, it was
course
non-cash.
not.
But this is right here. I mean, even Rod Rosenstein, especially Rod Rosenstein, who has a summa cum laude degree, I think, from Wharton, went to Harvard Law School, he should understand accounting. This is the largest expense on the balance sheet, is a bold fraud. And the significance of this is if you say it's cash, that means that you spent cash. Your cash balance should decline. But in this case, 36 million of this expense was not cash.
But
therefore,
Charles,
there's a missing $36 million.
This is maybe stupid, but when they're saying cash, they're talking about actual 10s, 20s, $100 bills?
No, or their equivalent. So a wire.
Check.
A check. And it means cash money actually left the building, is the theory.
Instead of what, though?
If I own an asset and I say, I've got 100 acres and I could
donate the land.
Well, I've got 100 acres and I could make 35 plots out of it, let's say, just pick a number. And I restrict my development rights to only 5, okay? I could take a tax deduction for the difference in value, the diminution in value that I suffer by saying instead of intensively developing it, I'm going to more moderately develop it. The value of when I ultimately sell it will be less. So today in 2018, I'm going to take an upfront deduction for that difference.
But for the dumb people like me, you're talking about, I write you a check for $45 million, I give it to the Clinton Foundation, that's cash. I say I own a swamp in Arkansas worth $45 million, you can have it, that's non-cash.
Well, in this case, it would be I've set up a building, you've set up a building, and I'm entering into a legal agreement that allows National Archives to have possession of a portion of this asset for 99 years with one 99-year extension.
The building.
I'm not giving the National Archives a penny of cash in this transaction. I'm just entering into a legal agreement. You can't call what you did a cash grant. It's like for somebody who's an accountant, who's got a CPA, who's licensed in the state, for a firm, this is the biggest transaction, the biggest aspect of this crooked foundation, and you get this wrong. And the consequence of getting it wrong is not immediately known because, of course, BKD says in 2004, instead of doing a cash flow statement, which is required under New York and California law and under good accounting practices, to hide this, we are going to omit the cash flow statement in 2004 so nobody will see this gigantic error.
Nobody except Charles Ortel.
Well, and Jason Goodman now, and the
I wouldn't
Crowdsource.
see it if you were showing me, but that's okay.
All right, so there's a $36 million fraud here. Now, I'm taking you through 2 problems. If we go back into the slides, 2 of the 5 problems, 4 problems so far. Oh, actually, I guess there are 5. I'm so good with numbers, I misnumbered the numbers. How do you like that?
Well, 1A and 1B.
No, I've got 2
twice.
2
That's
twos.
all right.
That's right.
At least
That's
it wasn't 3 threes, Charles.
It's
that
the
would be
Indian
worse.
blanket theory that nothing a man does or human does is perfect. Anyway, so the third item, which I incorrectly labeled 2, is a big one. If I go to you and I'm trying to figure out how much extra cash came into the Jason Goodman accounts,
Right.
and I say to you, all right, Jason, how much debt did you have outstanding on December 31st, 2003? And you tell me you had $28,479,840 of debt on December 31st, 2003, okay? And you had the same amount at the end of 2004. What that means is that you got no additional cash because you increased your borrowings, right? You had the same debt balance in the beginning as you had at the end of the year. You got no new cash into your books, okay? This is what the Clinton Foundation claims illegally in all of its filings for 2004 forward, that they had that they had debt outstanding, $28,479,840 on December 31st, 2003. But now let's pull this up. Here's their tax filing in 2000, not next, second one, yeah. Here's their tax filing for 2003, and if we go through it a little bit further,
down,
yeah, to the next, no, I think it's like several pages in. Stop. A little bit higher. Right here. Okay. Look at this line. Look at this line here. This is. First, let's look at the top of the page. All right. This says end of the year. This would be December 31st, 2003, and the beginning of the year, December 31st, 2002. Okay. We look down this page at line 60 odd. Here we go. 64B. How much debt does it say?
It's got nothing there.
Right. And this is under penalties of perjury. They said they had no debt. But in subsequent filings, they claim that as of December 31st, 2003, they had $28,479,630 of debt. That's a big error because that is hiding an inflow into the foundation of $28.5 million.
That they don't have to pay taxes on.
Well, it's not. It's just that they could divert. They could steal.
Well, they're not paying taxes anyway because it's tax exempt, but it's still tracking what's happening with the money.
Yeah, and it's not like when you borrow that kind of money, even if you're Bill Clinton, and you got a foundation, when foundations borrow money, it's problematic. You can't borrow money, for example, in a presidential foundation to build yourself a pleasure palace and massage parlor and a banquet hall. You can't do that.
They do have a banquet hall there. Do other presidential libraries have that?
Not to this. I don't know. Different things are on the menu in this one, I think, than most. But anyway, so here's a flat-out fraud, $28.4 million. If we go back into the slides, we then we talked about this Bush-Clinton-Katrina fund already, and then we have in 2004. This is a very tricky one. They amend this, and I'll try to do this quickly. We go slowly through this. We see that here's an amended balance sheet for 2004. You see restated. Then you go to the next page, slowly. This is an income statement for 2005, and it is actually an income statement that is egregiously wrong, that includes results for the Clinton-Bush-Katrina fund where they only have a 50% interest, maybe, in it, but excludes, it includes those results, and it includes in here the results of the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which they have 100% interest in, and these numbers are very different than the numbers that go for the 2005 tax filing of the Clinton Foundation. Very different numbers, okay? You can't do that. You gotta have, if you're going to show somebody an audit, this is supposedly an audit for 2005, then it should track precisely the tax filing for 2005. And now, mind you, these numbers were put together on June 9th, 2006, whereas the tax filings were put out, the incorrect tax filings were radically altered, were put out in October of 2006, so after the fact. So they intended to commit fraud. They had this knowledge of the state of the foundation June 9th, 2006, but they didn't use this. They didn't direct BKD to redo the numbers and do a separate audit for just the Clinton Foundation excluding CHI and one for CHI alone. They didn't do that. No, they said, we're just going to mislead everybody. And then if you go to the next page.
Well, at least they're even-handed.
To really confuse this, they could have retyped the side captions here so that you would know what these numbers meant. They just said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep you guessing as to what each of these things is. But if you go down here, this is the total amount of income in the year, net assets, and this is a very curious amount where they're claiming, you know what, we actually made $15,371,957 in connection with activities that we haven't explained through December 31st, 2003. Now, that's a big no-no, right? You can't just say, oh, you know, what I'm gonna do now this time, because I like you guys, is I'm gonna kind of bring you in the know, the circle of trust here, and I'm gonna tell you that, yeah, actually we made an extra 15 million, but I'm not gonna tell you what I did with the 15 million.
Or how you made it.
Right, so this is missing money. They don't account for this in the cash flow statement, and we, to this day, don't know whether that's really what they made, whether they made a lot more than that, how much they may have stolen, how they did this. And you're not going to figure this out unless you have the training to say, you know, most people would look at this and say, oh, I'm just going to ignore it, I don't know what this is. You know, yeah, take this page out, lay it up against the side captions from the preceding page, and you see what I'm talking about.
Charles, Periscope is telling me that Clinton and Jeb have a foundation as well.
Well, they've done, I don't know about Jeb, they were involved in, Jeb and Bill were involved in a business venture that the name will come to me, in a Florida-based company that was trying to sell, it was called Innovita Homes, and they were trying to sell these manufactured homes in Haiti.
Oh.
And the guy who was doing that, they got Jeb briefly on the board, they got various people around Bill on the board. Hillary got an OPIC loan, it is alleged.
OPEC?
Overseas Private Investment Corporation, a subsidized
OPIC.
I think it's an OPIC loan, to benefit this business. And the guy behind it, I think his name's Carlos Osorio, from memory, he had a Clinton problem. He liked cocaine, he liked high living, he liked spending money he didn't have, so he's in prison, still in prison for fraud.
Hey.
But anyway, if we could just keep going back to the slide, because I'm mindful of the time.
Yes.
All right, all these changes, they're not necessarily all additive, because they could be, you know, we could be double counting here, but if we look at each element and add them up, we're talking about $146 million of errors. Okay, just for one set of financial statements. Okay.
Wow.
This isn't like, you know, I think I'll give the accountant an A- and I'll give the person a 2 for effort. I mean, this is young person, give me your CPA license, give me your bank account, report directly to jail, tell your parents you're never going to see them again, kiss your kids goodbye, give your pets enough food, you're going up the river forever, and you're never going to work again.
No paddle.
I mean, this is like not even close to what you should be doing, right?
Yeah.
And this I do just from the outside.
Well, I appreciate the enthusiasm with which you explain it, because it is not immediately obvious to the average person.
Right. Well, I'll take you through some more.
Yeah.
So this analysis above here doesn't get into how much money the Clintons may have stolen from government grants that aren't in these numbers. They report no government grants until 2008 for the Clinton Foundation. And though they're supposed to report them every year, though there's text here about Irish grants.
Does that have anything to do with John Glasgow going missing in 2000?
It could well. He could have been asking questions. So I think what happened...
They had to shift to something else?
Yeah, they just say, listen, you know, John, you're going to have to stop asking questions. And then he'd say, well, but my job is to ask questions. Bill Clark used to tell me that's what I was supposed to do. Are you telling me I'm not supposed to be the CFO? I mean, I can imagine how a difficult CFO would be all over this.
And he's 45, so he's kind of old enough to be confident in his position and young enough to maybe still have the energy. He's not so old that he's like, forget it, and he's not so young that he's like a dummy.
Right. So if we go, now we're going to go a little bit, I could spend a tremendous amount of time going into minutiae, and I don't want to do that.
I find it hard to imagine you doing that.
Well, all right, in that case.
I'm kidding.
We go to the next page. All right. This is something that I think accountants who are watching this, the FBI if you're watching this, investigators if you're watching this, if the reason you have 3 different approaches in an accounting set of financial audit is you have the income statement, which gives you a sense of how much your inflows and outflows were, focusing on profit. Then you have, so that says for 2004 and 2005, prepared on a consistent basis. how did this foundation do in terms of getting contributions, and how did it do in terms of spending money, and how much money was left over. That's what you're supposed to do. Then the balance sheet then says, at the end of the period, the end of 2004, at the end of 2005, what did my stock of assets and liabilities look like? How much cash did I have? How much this? How much that? Blah, 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 blah. Then you have the cash flow statement is a roadmap for somebody like me that helps you figure out not just the profit, how did the profit move in a year, but how did the cash actually move in the year? That's what people really, like me, care about a lot. Profit, interesting. Balance sheet, Cash flow, we care about. You look at how much cash was generated by this sucker and how much was spent, okay? And a key thing to understand is that the changes in the balance sheet amounts that are shown in the balance sheets have to reconcile to the penny to the changes that are stated in the cash flow statement. And here's an example of an obvious forced set of frauds, okay? Forced, so I'll show you why. They say at year-end 2004, they had so much in land, so much in furniture and equipment, so much in building, so much in gross property, okay? $127,202,348. Then they say by the comparable period at the columns at the end of 2005, they had 135 million. That means that the capital expenditures for that year, the amounts devoted to increasing your physical plant, should be shown as 8,073,128, because that's the mathematical difference of each of those things, right? In the cash flow entry, however, they say that the difference was 19,951,824. There
How
should
is that
not
possible?
be. Well, I'll show you. There should not be that big of an error. There shouldn't be. It should be off by a penny, let alone a dollar. Okay, it's off by 11,878,696. So you say, okay, how do you fix that? If you're a crooked accountant at BKD and you're Bill Clinton, Crooked Clintons, Chelsea Crooked Clinton,
Backspace
Hillary,
button.
No. You take another account and you do a exactly corresponding error that hides the first error. So you say here, accounts payable and accrued expenses, when your accrued expenses go down by 9,586,018, right? That's what the balance sheet says. But the cash flow entry says they went up by 2,292,678, and the sum of those two changes is exactly equal to 11,878,696.
That seems smoke and gun.
It is. It's anybody looking at this with, and I have the disability in accounting that when I went to, I'm not bragging, but when I went to Harvard Business School, we were taught accounting by the wrong method, not the modified CAT. We were taught by the case method, where accounting is basically rules. And you can look up the rules and you learn the rules and you apply the rules. That's not the way I was taught. We would go into our first, I'll never forget this, one of our first cases, we sit down and the teacher's saying, well, okay, how should we account for this? It's like, that's not what I want to know. I mean, the rules are the rules. How should we account for this in theory? Well, and you're like, but it's actually good training, because when you think the way I've been taught, you understand the rules a lot better. Anyway, I will tell you as somebody who's not so bad with math, this is a clear sign, just this one thing here, of forced fraud. Okay,
when you say forced, though, what do you mean forced?
Well, they had to, remember, this is 2004, 2005, we're talking about making estimates of how much money was spent on the complex in Little Rock, okay? The books and records in the cash flow statement claim that they spent almost 20 million. The changes in the balance sheet say, no, we only spent 8. So there's an $12 million over. Remember, there's 11.4 million missing in 2005 restatement, 11.2. Here we have an 11.9 million error in the same time frame. Could it be they're related? Probably very much so. So you have to cover this off. The cash flow statement stuff has to balance. So what you do is you lie about an entry that nobody would check other than me or people like me. And here's clear evidence of fraud. Clear evidence.
And probably, this is the most damning evidence of intent.
Right. These forced errors were made on June 9th, 2006.
Like you're saying forced, this isn't an accident that such a complicated number comes out exactly the same.
Now let's go to the next page and I'll show you why I'm so sure. Okay. The Clintons basically assumed, and this is sort of fun, it's kind of like Bill Clinton making the comments that he made today on Lewinsky. I mean, they assume that nobody's going to check the tax forms.
Right.
And evidently Rod Rosenstein, you didn't check them, and James Comey, you certainly didn't check them. Bob Mueller, you didn't check them, and the trustees, you didn't check them. Dopey Chelsea Clinton didn't check any of this to get her PhD. But here we have, you're forced in what's called the 990, the tax form for the Clinton Foundation. You're forced to lay out your top 5 payments to contractors in the back of the form. And here you see it. They say $10,574,736 went to CDI. And let's think about that. In 2005, why did the Clinton Foundation spend $10,574,736 to CDI?
It was done building the thing.
It was finished on November 18th, 2004. Okay, now, would CDI have been wise to give credit to this fraud to allow them to,
What do you mean credit?
in other words, CDI does the work, they finish the complex, they say, you know what, Bill, you're a good guy, I want to get invited to your banquet hall, the massage parlor, sounds good to me. I won't make you pay your bill before the opening of this foundation, which is the opposite of what a contractor would do. A contractor would say, listen.
Give me the money now.
Yeah, it would say, listen. But
most can't float that.
Right. Well, most contractors, when they're in their prime, what they do is they try to get you to pay in advance, to pay give me half the contract up front, right?
And so they're not laying out cash for the materials and stuff.
But certainly, if you've got this deadline, you got Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter and all their wives and friends, whatever, jetting into Little Rock to appear at this opening of the Clinton Foundation. The construction firm has enormous leverage. They say, listen, you want to have this opening?
Right,
you pay your
give
bill
us the money
before November 18th. Besides, I finished this construction well before November 18th. So the likelihood that CDI actually received $10,574,736 in 2005 in an accounting statement that was finished by June 9th, 2006, in my view, is remote. Okay, I think it's an invented number, and it stands at the core of any potential conflicting questions that the missing John Glasgow would have had. This is precisely the period where Dillard's subsequently restated financials for this period, and you see that the total in the tax form, they say they spent 13.7. Maybe some of this isn't a capital expenditure, but the total sum in the balance sheet for capital expenditures is $8 million. So you have a $5.7 million mistake there. Alternatively, if you use the capital expenditures that are in the cash flow statement, you have a $6.2 million error there. And as I told you, there should not be any errors, right? This should all reconcile precisely, and it doesn't.
This is maybe not directly related, Charles, but do you think they built this thing right next to the Arkansas River so they could chuck people off this bridge?
Hard to say.
Yeah.
So then
so you're saying that basically, as you have, our friend John Glasgow may have been looking at these things saying, what the hell?
Right, and so the key thing, and I know this from having bought and sold companies, in any type of assignment where you've got an accounting firm involved, there's a correspondence file. And the accounting firm will say, hey, Jason, it's time for your audit. When can we show up and look at the books? Here's our questionnaire. And you have back and forth. Is there any kind of problem?
They say, what's this? What's this?
Well, they go through that process, and then it reaches a point where they say, well, you're Jason Goodman Inc., and we got issues, and so there's something is drafted which is called the management letter. And BKD sends a letter to Jason Goodman, and I say, dear Jason, I'm prepared to issue my audit if you will represent to me the following. Point 1, I'm concerned about this. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we fight about what's in the letter. You say, I don't want this in the letter. This is horrible. Can you take that out? And I say, no, not if you want an audit, I can't. We fight about it. And that management letter is crucially important. Now, we know that Andrew Kessel was
Who hires the audit, me or the IRS?
No, the company. The trustees, technically, of the foundation are the ones who, on behalf of the foundation, engage the auditor. Now, it's bad practice in this case to have the same auditor fill out the 990 and do the independent audit.
Right.
So it should be two separate audits.
Yeah.
Auditors.
One person checking the other.
And it's certainly bad practice to say, you know what I think I'll do? I'm going to get a firm that has a notorious record for letting fraud slip by, that has a Little Rock office that works for all of the fraudsters in Little Rock. That's who I'm going to use to get this crooked audit together. So you have that correspondence file. You're the FBI, maybe you're the non-Little Rock-based FBI. You've got the electronic records. You've got all kinds of stuff I don't have. You get to the bottom of this within a week.
Right.
And if the Clinton Foundation says, you know what, as part of our normal record retention policy, we have a policy on burning all incriminating evidence related to this foundation.
Burn bags, yeah.
Right. Then the IRS says, well, that's very interesting because you have to prove to us that you didn't commit fraud, and if you're telling us that you burned all your records, we know you committed fraud.
Kelly Fustos says the IRS division is supposed to audit nonprofits.
No, they're two separate things. She's wrong. There's an audit. There's a kind of audit that it happens to people and companies episodically, right? This is we're talking about is a financial confirmatory audit that foundations above a certain size by state laws have to get a real audit. And New York and California define the audit as a serious matter. It's not going to your girlfriend and saying, look, I'll tell you what, you sign this piece of paper and I'll buy this engagement ring. You can't do stuff like that. It's truly independent auditing firm, truly taking a deep dive, truly making sure that everything's hunky-dory. And obviously that's not what happened here.
Right.
So if we go down to the final slide, we're almost going to make the 2-hour deadline here. The same stuff happened in 2003 and 4. Here we have the same, slightly different collection of accounts. In 2003, the biggest entry on the balance sheet was construction in progress. Okay, that's basically, I would argue, a slush fund account. What you do...
It's a huge number.
It's a gigantic number. And the issue here is that just because you spent the money doesn't mean that at December 31st, 2003, your construction in progress is still worth $70.6 million. An accounting firm would have to say, well, what's the likelihood the Clinton Foundation is actually going to complete this? Do they have the money in the bank to pay for this? Are there any problems? Did we find out in 2003, the books for 2003 weren't put together until early 2004. Did we learn on May 24th, 2004, that the Clinton Foundation had gutted the legal authority to operate as a presidential library by creating a subsidiary they controlled to house international HIV/AIDS fighting rights in the subsidiary in bold violation of state, federal, and foreign law? Did we learn that in March of 2004? If we did, then we would have known, check, that this construction in progress is worth bupkis.
Zero.
Negative.
Because it's a liability.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could have shut the thing down, sued the trustees, put these people in jail. To say that it's $70.6 million is laughable. But anyway, you look at the total is 71,779,712 at year end 2003. They make a judgment. They say, we're going to take this construction in progress, eliminate it, and value the building and the fixtures at $114 million, right? So somebody had to, normally the way that would work is a bunch of nerdy trolls would go and look at this thing and say, okay, let me see all the legal documents. Let me make sure that you're a real foundation, that you're complying with the law. Let me see what you spent. Now let's go and see how much did George W. Bush pay for his, or George H.W. Bush pay for his foundation and other structures that are similar. Let's try to value them, accounting for the fact that this one is in Little Rock, an inexpensive market, versus another one that's in Texas or
Boston
Houston or
something.
Whatever. There should be a report from a real credible person that says, we looked at all this and we did not decide that we could take the amount spent. We instead concluded that this was really only worth $95 million. And we allocated it so much to the land, so much to furniture. And would they have checked, for example, that the land in question here is land in Hot Springs, Arkansas, to do the Camp David retreat that was never authorized by the Clinton Foundation. That land number is a nonsense. They did not properly value the interest that the Clinton Foundation had in the land under the long-term lease in Little Rock. They didn't do that right. They certainly didn't do the building and fixture part of it right. And then if you look at, just as we did in 2005, look at gross property. It goes from 71,779 to what? 114,803,660.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
Jump of 43. What does it say in the cash flow books that are prepared in 2006, going all the way back to 2004, what does it say they spent? It says they only spent 15 million bucks. So there's a discrepancy of $28 million here, unexplained. And then you go down, they're saying they spent 43 million during 2004, but when they're asked the top 5 contractors, they only spent $15.6 million. Look how much, was CDI the largest one in 2004?
No.
Doyne was the largest, some entity, Maltby. CDI was only 3.4 million in 2004, the year where the bulk of the work was done. How could you have 3.4 million in 2004 and 10 million in 2005 when the work was completed? Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right? And the total here for the top 5 adds up to 15.6, roughly the same as the cash flow entry, 15.1. Clearly the 43 million is an invented number, right? And what you try to do, if what you're doing Enron style, I mean, this is Enron in philanthropy. It's the same story. If you've got a construction project, you've got an acquisition project that you can put expenses against, right? You say, well, yeah, that wall over there, I spent 8 million bucks on that wall when you really spent 100,000 bucks. That allows you to mask lots of other things. That allows you to take a loss and turn it into a profit. And it's not like it's a new trick. I mean, this has been going on since they built the pyramids or before that. I mean, they probably, where they just say, look, we want to steal, we want to hide money, we'll inflate the reported construction costs of this thing. No one will be the wiser, and off we go. Boom, boom, boom. And by the way, who's the team involved here? You've got the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and Terry McAuliffe, as the most important independent director from like 99 right the way through to 2013, every single year. He's the person who says he's spending more than the average time of directors on this. What does he need to do in real life? He needs to raise a lot of money to fund Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry in 2004, other Democrats. This is a perfect way. You stand around this thing, you raise money, and you migrate it into campaigns, whether it's John Kerry's, Hillary Clinton's Senate, Hillary Clinton's presidential, or whatever.
Well, and the period at the end of this decades-long sentence is that if Hillary had won, this would all continue to be masked. I mean, this really is a Ponzi. They just keep building it up and up and up and up and up. And I mean, let's face it, if she won, and then she won again in 2020, if any of us remained alive after that, she'd be like 80. And then what? No one's going to prosecute her. I mean, she'd be like, Captain Pike, head in a box, beeping around at 80.
Yeah, she may already be there. But what I would say, though, is, we've now given, I try to keep this to under 2 hours. We've given experienced investigators, what they need to do, and I'm happy to talk to investigators, to go into this mess and not ask and see simply the magnitude of the fraud. I've illustrated for you, it's tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud, just going through December 31st, 2005. But it's time to go back into the mysterious death of John Glasgow.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a little bit unnerved. This is a good slide here, the Roger Glasgow thing.
That's what I wanted to talk about a little bit because, in preparation for today's show, Charles, I started to dig into this a little bit, and I mean, I had heard about this. I think we've even spoken about it. It's come up before, and I've been very interested in the mysterious death of Vince Foster. Of course, one of our very first interviews, coincidentally, the death of Peter W. Smith happened like that day. You got informed of it, I think, like either while you were sitting there or on the walk over. So I started to look at this a little bit, and as it turns out, his brother remains alive. There was some stories about it recently, or more recently in 2015, his skull was found, like randomly by hikers in a park. And they say that it was immediately sort of speculated that it was his skull.
And just this is the medical examiner's report, if you go, this is 3 days before Hillary Clinton announced for president.
3 days before?
Yeah, this report came out.
Right. Well, so the this talks about how the medical examiner's report has been released, and I did call the medical examiner's office this morning, and there was a very strange, like, rapid busy signal that indicated to me that something was wrong with the phone at the medical examiner's office. I'm getting a lot of insight into some of the weird stuff that goes on in medical examiner offices in some of these secondary cities. So I called the Little Rock emergency management number that was sort of on the same webpage, and I told them about this strange phone ringing of the coroner's office, and the guy was like, "Oh, that figures." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Never mind." And I wish I had recorded the call. It's one call I didn't record. And he would not elaborate on what he meant about the phone not answering. So I got actually the cell phone number of the guy who is the medical examiner. I called it several times and he didn't answer. But I began to dig into this a bit more. Obviously, when your family member is missing for 7 years and nobody knows where he is, they started a webpage to try to find him, and they had rewards and things out for information about, trying to find John Glasgow. And I learned that his brother Roger, so here's his brother, the skull found, this is the park, Petit Jean is the park where his skull was found. Oddly, this webpage doesn't let me zoom in my normal way, but that's his brother there. So I attempted to contact his brother, who is a lawyer.
Yeah, it's right to the right there.
Well, this is...
the next to the left, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So what I learned was that his brother had actually been running for Deputy Attorney General of Arkansas.
Well, and he worked at Wright, Lindsay and Jennings, which is the law firm that basically where Bruce Lindsay works, which
Right.
is the law firm that gutted the Clinton Foundation on March 24th, 2004 by illegally forming a subsidiary that was not allowed to do what it was formed to do.
Right. And so when I thought about this along the lines of, a lot of times I would say brothers, although they can be vastly different, they basically share the same values, and this notion that John Glasgow is extremely honest, well, let's presume that Roger Glasgow might also be extremely honest. He's in the business of being a lawyer. I would hope that those are guys that uphold the law. So maybe he's running for Attorney General in Arkansas, and Bruce Lindsay and some of these other guys who know Bill Clinton, who's obviously in Arkansas politics at the time, they decide that they don't like that, and they basically planted some marijuana in his car.
24 pounds of it.
Yeah. And when he was driving back from Mexico, he got arrested for drug trafficking. Now, the case was dropped. The government's case fell apart.
Look at this. It says, Munson helped an inebriated investment banker. There are not many investment banks in Little Rock. It's probably Stevens.
Interesting.
But he wrote a book about this. We've got to get this book.
Yes,
Down
absolutely.
and Dirty, Down South Politics and the Art of, what does it say?
Down and Dirty Down South, Politics and the Art of Revenge.
Just published last year.
Right. Roger Glasgow, the brother of John Glasgow, wrote a book about dirty tricks in politics that was published in 2016. So I have also reached out to Roger Glasgow. I was only able to get his email address. The law firm didn't want to give me his phone number, and he's retired from the law firm. But we're going to continue looking into this, and I am quite intrigued by this matter. I think we've covered what we've got right now fairly thoroughly. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? Oh, wait a minute. There was something, but it's kind of unrelated. Should we save it for the whole Saudi Arabia thing?
We've got a few minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been looking quite a lot at events that have gone on in Saudi Arabia basically since October 1st and maybe even a little bit before. It's been speculated that what happened in Las Vegas may have been some sort of Saudi royal family war spilling out onto the streets. And that doesn't preclude any of the testimony or speculative theories that have said that ISIS was involved. We know from Hillary Clinton emails to John Podesta that Saudi is funding ISIS, at least in Libya and Syria. So the fact that they might be, working on some kind of arms deal there in Las Vegas with someone who could be working for the Saudis is not remotely too difficult to imagine. And you had located this article earlier in everyone's favorite website here, oilprice.com, about the oil kingdom is in crisis and the family rift has turned violent. This basically talks about how there was a gun battle at the Royal Palace in Riyadh on, I think, April 21st or something like that. It fails to mention that there was also a shootout in Jeddah at a Royal Palace on October 6th or 7th, just within the week after.
Paddock,
yeah. So something's been going on in Saudi Arabia, and I had a group of guests on Crowdsource the Truth not long ago where we were examining any possible Saudi Arabian involvement, and one of the guests turned what I would call almost verbally violent and completely decimated the relationship that I had with him over the mere possibility that we would be investigating Saudi Arabian involvement, and he presented false evidence to misdirect the crowd. Said he had news articles that corroborated statements from the Saudi Arabian embassy, which I never heard those statements from the Saudi Arabian embassy, and we heard statements in direct contradiction. Even this article doesn't give us any positive confirmation that Mohammed bin Salman, the controversial crown prince that's changing a number of things about the Saudi Arabian government and the culture there in Saudi Arabia, we don't know if he's alive or dead, and this doesn't provide any positive confirmation.
Well, I hope he is alive. I think that when you, as your first act in your early 30s, you say, you know what, I'm going to get all my rivals to show up at a hotel so I can hang them upside down and beat their feet until they cough up, $100 billion. It's not, not the best way to make friends and influence enemies. So as a guest, that strong opening move reverberated and cheesed off a large number of people and powerful people. So let's hope that Mohammed bin Salman is okay. But I think we deserve to know.
Well, people in the United States are generally not aware that what goes on in Saudi Arabia has tremendous impact here, because it is still the most important cog in the machine that keeps the petrodollar going. And we've recently seen China buying oil for yuan. The petro yuan is happening now. Obviously, everything going on in Iran is in direct contradiction to whatever political and economic motivations Saudi Arabia might have. Iran wants to sell their oil for yuan, and that's going to have a major impact on the U.S. economy. So we really need to keep our eyes on what's going on there, totally separate from what's going on with this really unsolved case of John Glasgow.
Well, thanks for giving us a chance to go through this, and thanks for following it. And I think we really need to encourage members of the crowd who may know something about this to help out and push and raise consciousness and force investigators to tell us what really happened, and then also to expose the degree to which any investigation that may have occurred way back when it was thought that Hillary might ultimately be president of the United States, how and whether any of those investigations may have been stiff-armed and slowed.
Yeah. And Charles, right now we're really hitting on the core purpose of Crowdsource the Truth, because when we did that first interview and you spoke about Peter W. Smith, someone in the Crowdsource community who people have seen, Pepper Stanley, said, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of close to where I live. And she just, on her own accord, dug into all that and produced evidence that I haven't seen anywhere else. She really chased down a lot of leads and was talking to local police, local reporters, etc. So perhaps that can happen again, and we can, nothing happens immediately, obviously. This is complicated stuff to figure out. But as we continue to kind of move the ball down the field on these different items, perhaps we can actually have an impact on trying to solve some of these unsolved crimes. Yes. So thank you for joining me, Charles. We have a very special closing in coming up later this week. And of course, we'll be traveling somewhere to do that. It's important that people remember, if they like to see us travel around, or even if they like to see me sitting here at this desk, costs money to buy food and turn on the lights in the apartment and everything. So it's really important that viewers become sponsors by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or by just sending a one-time sponsorship payment via PayPal, paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. There are a lot of people who don't trust these electronic internet methods of payment. The address here at HQ has been doxed umpteen times, so I'm totally happy to give that out to anyone. They can email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org, and I will happily send them an address. Charles, thank you for joining me. This has been a stunning presentation with regard to this case. I don't know that anyone has examined the death of John Glasgow from a forensic accounting standpoint, which you've just done for us, and I sincerely hope that the investigators in the family of John Glasgow see the program that we've just done and we can move this forward. I'll see you Wednesday, Charles. Thanks for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.